A U.S. aircraft carrier slices through the dark water of the Persian Gulf, its deck glowing under red lights as jets cycle on and off. Inside the Combat Information Center, screens are full radar, satellite feeds, encrypted chat from other ships in the strike group. Then, almost imperceptibly, things begin to slip. A radar track jumps sideways for no reason. A GPS position blinks and reappears miles off. A routine radio call from an escort crackles, distorts, and dies. One by one, systems that have never failed in drills begin to lag, glitch, or go completely silent. On the bridge, the captain picks up a handset and hears nothing but a wall of static where higher headquarters should be, unbeknownst to the crew. The carrier has just crossed into a carefully prepared dead zone, a pocket of ocean where Iran's electronic warfare units have layered jamming, spoofing, and cyber attacks to blind and isolate anything that wanders in. From shore, Iranian operators watch their scopes and listen to their own radios, knowing that for the first time in decades, a U.S. carrier strike group is partially deaf and partially blind in waters. Iran knows by heart. This is the scenario we're about to walk through. A U.S. carrier lured into an electronic kill box. Iran jamming communications across the board. And both sides suddenly forced to fight in the dark. The road to that dead zone begins with a pattern most civilians never notice. Months before the carrier ever leaves port, strange reports start trickling in from commercial captains and regional navies. GPS positions that don't make sense. Navigation systems insisting a ship is sitting on dry land. An automatic identification system tracks that show tankers teleporting across the Gulf in minutes. To most shipping companies, it's just another headache in a dangerous part of the world. Two Western intelligence analysts, something else a sign that somebody is deliberately tampering with the electromagnetic landscape. Iran has invested heavily in electronic warfare for exactly this reason. It can't match the U.S. ship for ship or jet for jet, but it can try to blind and confuse them. Over the years, Revolutionary Guard units have quietly fielded more powerful jammers. GPS spoofers and cyber tools aimed at radar, communications links, and navigation systems. Some are mounted on trucks along the coast. Others are moved onto small ships that can sit close to busy sea lanes and quietly contaminate the airwaves. Inside U.S. Central Command in Tampa, analysts start flagging the incidents. Merchant vessel reports of lost GPS. Regional allies complaining about interference on military radios. And occasional spikes in strange electronic noise picked up by U.S. surveillance aircraft. Taken alone, each story could be a glitch. Taken together, they look like testing Iranian crews rehearsing how far they can reach and how much disruption they can cause before anyone pushes back. At the same time, tensions in the region rise. A new round of sanctions slams into Iran's already fragile economy. Its leaders respond with sharper rhetoric. Threats about the Strait of Hormuz, warnings that U.S. bases are within missile range, and public displays of new electronic warfare units on parade. Western media focuses on the missiles and drones. Planners in Washington also focus on something quieter. The growing ability of a regional power to mess with the electromagnetic environment that modern militaries depend on. When a U.S. carrier strike group is ordered into the region on a scheduled deployment, there's nothing unusual about it on paper. The Navy has been rotating carriers through the Gulf and nearby waters for decades. Officially, this one is there to reassure allies, conduct exercises, and support broader operations across the Middle East. Unofficially, everyone involved knows it's also a show of force, a reminder to Iran that despite budget fights and global commitments, the United States can still park a floating airbase within range of its coast. Iran watches every movement. Spy satellites, shore-based radars, fishing boats with more antennas than nets, and online ship tracking tools are all used to map the carrier's pattern. Over time, a rhythm emerges, where the group tends to turn. How far it usually stays from the coast, which corridors it prefers to use. Somewhere inside Iran's Revolutionary Guard, a plan takes shape to quietly bend that rhythm. To nudge the carrier just a little off its usual track and into a pocket of ocean where Iran's jammers and spoofers have the upper hand. The nudge begins with something that looks, at first, like a simple distress call. Late one night, a U.S. escort destroyer standing watch on the edge of the formation picks up an urgent transmission on an international emergency frequency. The voice is panicked, accented but speaking good English. A small tanker, claiming to be under threat from unidentified armed boats, harassing it near a certain set of coordinates. Gunfire pops in the background. A broken plea. They're coming closer, any coalition warship. Please respond. Protocols kick in. The destroyer's watch team logs the call, cross-checks the ship's name and reported position against commercial tracking data. On their screens, a vessel with that ID does show up in roughly that area, but the digital world can lie. What they don't see is that the eyes identifier they're trusting could have been cloned or manipulated somewhere upstream. To them, this looks like another one of the regional incidents the Navy has dealt with before. Small boats, threatening merchant shipping in a crowded, tense waterway. Higher up the chain, the carrier's task force commander is alerted. He's seen this movie: harassing behavior, potential hostage situations, the risk of another international incident if Western forces do nothing while a friendly or neutral ship is attacked. The decision is made to adjust the group's track slightly, putting an escort and perhaps a helicopter closer to the reported location, not a full diversion. It's just a measured move to be in position if things get worse. On a map, it barely looks like anything. In reality, it pulls the formation closer to a slice of ocean Iranian planners have been eyeing for months. Onshore, on a darkened Iranian command post, officers watch the carrier's slight change of course. They already know about the distress call. They may have generated it. Their job isn't to start shooting yet. It's to shape the environment. Powerful shore-based jammers and mobile electronic warfare platforms at sea begin shifting their patterns, concentrating energy in a specific volume of space project ahead of the carrier's path. GPS spoofers ready altered signals that can be turned on at just the right moment. Back on the carrier. Most of the crew has no idea anything unusual is happening. On the flight deck, jets are being refueled, rearmed, and cycled through night operations. In the galley, sailors grab quick meals between watches. Deep inside the ship, though, specialists in the electronic warfare cell begin to notice a change. Background noise on certain frequencies is creeping up. A few satellite communications links show more errors than usual. A radar track on the edge of the display flickers oddly before stabilizing. Alone, each item is a mild concern. Together they sketch the outline of something bigger. Someone is turning up the volume in the invisible spectrum around them. The commander has to make a judgment call. Turning the whole group around based on subtle EW anomalies would be an overreaction and a propaganda gift to Tehran. Ignoring them completely would be reckless. So the order comes down to tighten internal procedures, shift some communications to harden backup channels, verify navigation data with multiple sources, and put additional eyes on the electronic environment. The carrier strike group keeps moving. It's unaware that the water they're about to sail into has been prepared like a minefield, not of metal and explosives, but of noise and deception. The moment the carrier crosses into the heart of the dead zone, nothing explodes. Instead, systems start to fail in ways that feel like a bad dream, slow, disjointed, and just ambiguous enough to cause doubt. A routine position check shows the carrier where it should be, then suddenly jumps its icon a mile off track before snapping back. A secure satellite chat with a U.S. Air Force command post freezes mid-sentence and refuses to reconnect. A nearby escort ship calls in a standard status report over encrypted radio. But all that comes through on the carrier's end is a garbled mess of syllables and static in the Combat Information Center. Operators scramble to sort out what's real and what's not. One technician calls out that GPS accuracy bars have suddenly spiked, an indicator that the satellite signal they're receiving may be contaminated or spoofed. Another notes that certain radar modes are showing unusual clutter near the surface, as if something is injecting false returns into the picture. On a secondary display, a log scrolls by showing dropped packets, corrupted data, and failed handshakes between the carrier and its escorts. The order goes out quickly, calmly. Assume contested communications. Shipboard networks are shifted to pre-planned fallback configurations. Old-school backups come out, sextants, paper charts, visual bearings on known landmarks and stars, signal flags, Aldis lamps. On the carrier's bridge, an officer of the deck who grew up with GPS and satellite everything suddenly finds himself double-checking his position the way captains did in the 1980s. On the flight deck, operations tighten as air crews are briefed to expect lost data links, degraded navigation aids, and the possibility that their radios may go dead at the worst possible time. On the Iranian side, this is exactly the effect they were aiming for. In their view, if they can create a pocket where U.S. forces are isolated, cut off from higher headquarters, with confused navigation and patchy radar, they've gained a window of opportunity. In underground facilities and coastal bunkers, officers watch their screens as jamming arcs and spoofing cones overlay the likely position of the carrier and its escorts. They track how U.S. systems react, noting which frequencies go dark and which communications stubbornly punch through the interference. Every response becomes useful intelligence for the next crisis or for a real fight. The temptation to go further is strong. Some Iranian hardliners argue that now is the time to strike, launch a limited salvo of anti-ship missiles, while the carrier, situational awareness is degraded, demonstrating to the world that American power is vulnerable. Cooler heads warn that even a partially blinded U.S. strike group retains enormous destructive capability, and that any missile launch, successful or not, will almost certainly trigger a massive retaliation. For now, the decision from the top is to hold fire and watch, using the dead zone as a testbed rather than a kill box. Inside the carrier strike group, the mood is professional but tense. Without their usual constant digital link to commanders ashore, ship captains shift to pre-briefed mission orders. If cut off, maintain formation, protect the carrier, do not fire unless clearly attacked. Intelligence officers remind everyone that jamming and spoofing are not the same as bullets and missiles. Electronic warfare can cause confusion and fear, but it doesn't sink ships on its own. The goal becomes clear. Ride out the storm, gather as much data as possible on Iran's EW capabilities, and navigate out of the dead zone without stumbling into a kinetic exchange. The way out of the dead zone comes not from some high-tech magic button, but from discipline and preparation. Long before this cruise, the carrier strike group practiced operating under degraded communications, silent periods, radio blackouts, GPS denial drills. Those exercises now pay off. Escorts fall back on line-of-sight radios, directional antennas, and even signal lamps to maintain basic coordination. Helicopters fly short-range relay patterns, acting as airborne messengers between ships when longer-range links are jammed. Navigation teams cross-check inertial systems against visual bearings and sonar depth contours instead of trusting a single digital feed. Outside the worst of the jamming bubble, U.S. aircraft and satellites are still watching. An AWACS, orbiting well away from Iran's coast, sees a distorted but usable picture of the strike group's position and the electronic fog surrounding it. That information, passed back through more resilient, hardened channels, helps higher headquarters build a model of the dead zone nits, approximate shape, strength, and likely sources. Cyber units dig into logs from before and during the onset of jamming, looking for fingerprints in the data that might reveal how Iranian systems are built and controlled. As the carrier and its escorts slowly edge back out of the most intense interference, systems begin to clear one by one. A frozen satellite chat link suddenly reconnects with a backlog of queued messages. GPS accuracy bars drop to normal levels. Radar clutter eases. The first clean, clear radio transmission from a distant command center crackles through the speakers, and everyone on the bridge feels their shoulders drop a fraction of an inch. The strike group survived the dead zone without firing a shot. More importantly, it now has a treasure trove of EW intelligence to study. Publicly, almost none of this story is told. Official statements might acknowledge unsafe and unprofessional Iranian electronic interference, or note that U.S. forces operated safely in a contested electromagnetic environment. Tehran's line will be the mirror image, that Iran successfully countered American aggression and showed it can disrupt hostile forces near its shores. The real value for both sides lies behind the scenes, in the lessons drawn from how modern navies function when their invisible nervous system of signals and links comes under attack. For viewers like you, this scenario is more than just a cool plot for a techno-thriller. It's a glimpse into the future of conflict, where electronic warfare and cyber operations are as central as missiles and guns. A U.S. carrier lured into a dead zone, communications jammed. Navigation spoof. These are exactly the kinds of problems planners on both sides stay up late solving. Welcome to Elite U.S Military, where we break down not just the hardware, but the strategies, vulnerabilities, and near misses that shape modern warfare. If you want a full follow-up on how the U.S. might hit back in the electromagnetic spectrum targeting jammers, spoofers, and command networks, tell us in the comments. Type Dead Zone War Game so we know you're ready for the next level. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to Elite U.S Military, and hit the notification bell so you DN team miss our next deep dive from carrier strike groups under electronic attack to special operations teams. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the next war, the first shots you never see might be the ones you hear last.